problem that I think that we have here is a huge missed opportunity in the fact that any salesman, any broker, any trader, any asset manager, everything, there are so many enterprise chat channels at the moment. And if you trade, then you're aware and you've booked that chat. And if you don't trade, it gets forgotten. And that information to me is a goldmine of information.
How do people capture this stuff at the moment?
They'll record one thing one way, something else another way, then they'll be off for the afternoon. So all that information that comes through, it just won't be perfect.
What can the benefits, what's the upside?
Of all, this desk makes $100,000 on average a day. If just being more efficient by closing more trades on a very small marginal improvement of 10% is $10,000 a day. That's $2.5 million a year.
What's the solution look like?
I guess really what's equally as interesting to me is how does someone use that data? What is the process? How they've got this information, how do they go about accessing it, and how do they go about monetizing it for their business?
Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of ipushpull's podcast. My name's Andrew Capewell, Head of Product at ipushpull, and I'm joined by Scott Brown, who's the Head of Business Development. Scott, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Morning, Capers. Thanks for the intro. Yes, I'm involved in the business dev and the sales side of ipushpull. And for some context in terms of what we're going to talk about in a minute, I've grown up in the financial markets since the early to mid 90s, trading a range of financial products from Eurobonds, fixed income, futures, bonds, RV, structured derivatives and swaps, all the way through to prop trading as well. So there's an element of some qualification of any insight that we might talk about today for the rest of this call. The problem that I think that we have here is a huge missed opportunity in the fact that any salesman, any broker, any trader, any asset manager, everything, there are so many enterprise chat channels at the moment. And if you trade, then you're aware and you've booked that chat. And if you don't trade, it gets forgotten. And that information to me, as somebody who used to trade, is the most valuable information. It's who was trying to do something, didn't get it done, who wants to do it tomorrow. Is that now for me an indication of a level of a support or resistance? But it's hugely valuable information. I know who's doing what. I know who's interested in stuff as well. So that to me is information that everybody has literally under their nose. Yeah. It's a goldmine of information. And because it's unstructured and often in conversational chats, people don't think it's too hard to query and structure. I think they're missing out. I really do. I think that's hugely valuable.
Where does it go now? What happens to it?
Well, it'll be recorded somewhere. I imagine somebody at any institution will have a compliance obligation that needs to be able to, at some point in time, recover and query any of this historical chat. So that what that actually means is it's even better is that it's not just yesterday's chat or today's chat. You've got chat data going back 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 months. So your level of data that you have that you're still not using at your desk or reporting or your information flow or for management to look at who's trading, not trading, who's busy, who's not busy, it is even richer than just yesterday. You can run a real historical analysis on that.
I suppose at the moment, companies and the desks that are working on this, they've all got it in their head. They're all working on a slightly different version of the truth that they can remember. They might have the ability to remember what happened last week or be able to pick up on an order that happened. But is that foolproof?
No, it's basically you're relying on an individual with a certain sort of, I guess, self-serving bias. They'll remember what they need to remember to close a trade for themselves today, tomorrow. Some might disseminate the information, but the other thing that if you're capturing this information, you're capturing everything, all that domain knowledge you're retaining at the institutional level now. So once you've done that, you can, any business you've got in Asia that needs to pass on to London, needs to pass on to, the States and around it goes. Well, actually, if you're capturing and structuring all that information and making it available, then your business, you can unify your business really. You can really serve your clients better by capturing this information, by making it available. So the guy in London that's had an inquiry on a trade, didn't know anything about happened in Asia. If you've caught that information and when they type a certain product in or a certain client in, immediately that information of who last traded, last seen comes to them. They know who to ask. It's huge. You don't ask 5 people because they're your clients, but they have no acts in that business. To go and ask the people that are active in this, and you can close a trade before the market moves, rather than spend too long finding the other side or never finding the other side. So that's massive.
I suppose an interesting thought is, how do people capture this stuff at the moment? Are they capturing it manually? Are they putting it into back office systems? Does it even get captured? And why are some of those ways of doing it prone to risk or error, or not capturing everything, missing information? What happens?
Anything that's traded,
Yeah,
right, is because you've booked it, you've got that information. But again, the pre-trade and the IOI stuff is stuff that, well, the middle office or the back office wouldn't know anything about it. It's never on their horizon or their radar to actually book that. The people on the desk, maybe you have some juniors or some graduates or some people learning the ropes that might start booking it, but they'll probably not have a unified system to book it into. Maybe they'll book it in their own individual spreadsheets or record taking methods, and it won't be standardized, right? They'll record one thing one way, something else another way, then they'll be off for the afternoon, and they'll miss so much stuff. Maybe they'll think, well, actually I could do a trade here. So all that information that comes through, it just won't be perfect. It will not be complete. It won't be standardized. It won't be structured. There'll be gaps in everything. And really, if they're doing that, they're not trading or broking, or they're not making money for the institution anyway. So probably not very efficient.
that's really interesting. What's the best way forward? What's the solution here?
I think really to look at all these enterprise chats and to use a service that structures that information. And maybe there's some enrichment required as well. Maybe you want to append some client internal codes as well. It can be quite well configured to be uniquely consumed by either your system or a dashboard or a report. And once you've got that, then there are so many options of really what you can do with that data. We've talked about presenting it real time back to the desk when they're actually looking to do a trade or have an inquiry, telling them who to go to, where the other side is. But there's a huge strategic asset there that you can create with this data. And there are lots of elements to that. It can be reports to say, well, who traded yesterday, what are the profiles? It can be, what were the axes? What were people looking to do? You can almost reboot the day by looking at what was trying to be done yesterday and just tee up, how you start your day off as well. That can be templated. Management can look at, well, actually, what's the client flow? What are the traders doing? What were they working? Who's trading with us? Who's not even talking to us? That can be the external sort of oversight. And internally, they can say, well, actually, which of the brokers, sales, traders, which of any sort of asset at that institution, what are they doing? How are they doing it? How effective are they? Who are they missing as well? So there's some real analytics there as well that can be presented.
Why is now the right time? What's happening around the market that makes now a really cool time to start getting involved in this sort of stuff?
Technology has moved on, whether you're using bots to do this, whether you're using various elements of AI technology. I know there's not a meeting or a general sort of reports that don't mention AI, but it doesn't have to be the LLM AI. It can be the simple, fast, efficient, cheap, mapping, machine learning, regex, all that sort of stuff as well, that isn't expensive, that won't charge you a fortune. And as much as our financial markets are outwardly very, very complicated, if you're going to buy something, you buy, you pay, you bid. That's it. It's very, very simple. It's quite a finite syntax. So, it can be very efficient. And the technology is there now to go through this, to look at the conversational stuff and actually say, well, let's create objects information from all of the colloquial chat and present it back. That can still be verified by someone. They can look at it and triage it and pass through it very quickly. But the pass rates are, 70, 80% on this stuff now as well. And they'll only increase with training as well.
It's cool. And what can the benefits? What's the upside to a desk that's using this above a desk that isn't? How much more efficient can they be? How much more revenue can they generate?
Let's take a base case example. There are clients we're speaking to that have a desk, and we're not talking at this point about scaling the business. We're just saying at the moment there's a flow that comes through your desk. Okay. Sometimes the markets are busy and they move quick, and you have a price, and by the time you've sent out 5 inquiries to your clients, actually what you perhaps should have done is realize that the people that would have traded this with your company, your IDB, your broker, your bank, or your fund might not be on your client roster, but you should have gone ask other people. And if you can ask the right people at the right time, then you'll close those trades. You have a better chance of closing those trades quickly. So anecdotally, we're saying that, the conversation went along the lines of, well, this desk makes $100,000 on average a day. If just being more efficient by closing more trades on a very small marginal improvement of 10% is $10,000 a day. That's $2.5 million a year. Okay. And that's not growing the business. That's just being slightly better. And you could be multiples better. That's being slightly better at what you are currently doing on a day-to-day basis. So you're not changing anything. You're just closing more trades.
What's the process of using this data in terms of actually using, and what's the solution look like? Let's see how that works.
So I guess really what's equally as interesting to me is, how does someone use that data? What is the process? If they know they've got this information, how do they go about accessing it, and how do they go about monetizing it for their business?
Yeah, I think the really exciting thing is that they've every financial firm has to have this data already. They've already got access to it. They already have the data. What we're trying to do is taking a little bit of a different spin on it, creating a place where you can bring all of that data in and processing it using all the expertise and knowledge that we have at ipushpull to be able to turn that into structured output data using all of the different cool tools that are available now. Every bit of data is different. Every desk works in a different way. All of the different desks have different pieces of local stuff or information you need to run through. What we've been able to do is go through an entire day's or a couple of days worth of information, hold all of that data in memory, process that. We can go backwards and forwards in time, and we can deliver something at the end of the process that is structured data that is then usable in all sorts of different applications.
Okay. And top of your head, what's sort of turnaround time here? If someone's saying, actually, I'm interested, how do I do this?
Yeah.
Okay. How quickly can we return a deliverable product to them that they can start using at the desk and starting to make more money out of? What sort of time frame, lead time? What's the process?
Yeah, so using some of the techniques and the tools that we have available to us at ipushpull using our platform, we've been able to turn around pretty good rates of verified data. So you're talking upwards 90+% within a week of training that with that data. So you take a load of data, we look at what like conversations look like, we start to train and sample bits of it to understand it, make sure it's accurate, run that into the model, and the model can return really good results really quickly.
Okay. And once we've done that and structured all that information, we will present that to the user in a dashboard that when they're going about their day-to-day flow, whether the dashboard or they use as a whiteboard, almost they can put the information in, and from that dashboard, it can be configured, I guess, a number of different ways to present them with something that's a solution for their typical market or their workflow.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the most important things is, as you say, we put that into that dashboard. At that point, you then have the facility to sample some of that information and that data, so you can run through it. You can make sure that it's continually getting high results and good results on the way back, so you can manually go check it with a human in the loop. You don't need to go through every single message. Obviously, that would be super inefficient, but you can then sample, say 1%, 10%, whatever the number you like, to be able to then go and make sure that that's adequately tagged, and it will then rerun over the back of that every time that does that retagging. In terms of the further downstream uses of it, the analytics are available to be able to understand where the flow is coming from, where the flow is going, what times of day different participants are doing certain activities, how the brokers are working in the desk. But there's also then being able to utilize that information, so putting that into the platform to be able to then use that as a starting point every morning for what yesterday's order book looked like, what it ended up looking like, what it looked like through the day, so the broker can start to work that the next day, or the sales desk can start to work that the next day, as well as all of the downstream analytics on top of it.
We'll have a dashboard that's a whiteboard that can be, pretty useful for providing a tool at the desk. What's the business monitoring of this strategic asset?
Yeah, I think there's the whole level around, how does someone take that data? There's a couple of use cases. One of the big use that we talked a little bit about the use case on the brokers. We talked a little bit about the use case for the analytics and the downstream information. There's also the keeping on top of how the brokers are working, what the efficiency level are, what the order to trade ratios look like, all of that backwards history of data that's all in the chat conversation that isn't necessarily being used at the moment to actually form any sort of routine analysis. Even if you think order to trade, well, people are thinking around that as very much on the exchange. You're in anything that's captured, but they're not capturing all of the extra information that's in chat platforms. And you think about the percentage of of the date of the quotes that come through any sort of desk on a regular basis that are chat and never actually captured into a form or a ticket.
Yeah, and I guess equally as well, you can have people that you have market makers that you've sent them, 80 inquiries, and maybe they only came back on 10 or 15 as well. You won't see that unless you're capturing these sort of metrics as well. There'll be clients that perhaps someone says, yeah, they're a great client, and actually they're not showing you any prices at all as well, and that will get lost in translation. You'll be discovered eventually, but usually at that point it's past the tipping point of resurrecting that relationship as well. And I guess from a business perspective, you can, as you've just described, monitor the flow, the client coverage, the return on prices, even the quality of the prices. All very well if I'm a 5 bid thinking it's a 6 middle. If your guy comes back and shows you a 12 offer, that's no good. Where everybody else is showing you 7s and 8s as well. So there's a lot of intrinsic information on a qualitative and quantitative basis there. And I guess that's reports that can be generated in axes, heat maps, general client flow, inquiries, messages as well. I think the granularity of once we've got the data structured, or once anybody has that data structured at such a granular level, then the output of that is really in the eye of the beholder. It's a very rules-based and very simple output method that businesses will have slightly different requirements, but easily catered to.
And what's the future of this space look like? We talked a lot about chat. What else is there?
I think you can take the chat channels, and again, the way that chat and voice are broken down, I think in most markets, chat is, plus or minus, but roughly 60% of all the flow. And then there is still an element of voice in there that's 40%. Now, 60% is huge, but not, as we've just discussed, people are sitting on information they're not using. They are not capturing even that 60%. So the first thing is to do a better job at what is right in front of you as well. And the next part of that is to say, well, actually, there's a voice market to be really perfect on sort of capturing full flow and full data, having full market insight. Then if you're missing 40% of the market, then you're not. So audio is probably, for most institutions, I'm sure it is being recorded for compliance purposes, but never looked at until somebody needs to for any reason, best execution or any sort of trade process or any querying about, is there something untoward happening? But actually, audio can be turned into transcript is a chat, and we're back to where we've just talked about now as well. So I think it's a relatively small step to capture the whole market, but if you're not capturing the 60% of what's the easiest thing to do for you, I'll probably start on that first. So, I mean, you've obviously done quite a bit of work on this. So in terms of the research and the R&D that they've been working on over the last 18 months, what do you think the biggest challenges are to capturing, orchestrating and structuring this sort of data?
I think some of the biggest challenges are the context. In a trade, quite often you get the full result of what the trade is in one line or in a couple of lines, because everyone needs to agree on all of the specifics. On orders, often it can refer to something that's been talked about earlier in the day. It can refer to something that's just more in the news or generally known. If central banks change interest rates, then everyone's talking about it, and so then obviously if somebody's quoting for a price, they might be quoting for that. Or if there's been an output change in LNG, floating storage, something like that, everyone's talking about the same thing, and we need to be able to work out the context from the conversations that are happening in the aggregate to be able to turn that, and also nesting those conversations together. People often have multiple threads in a conversation. They might be working multiple orders or an entire order book at one point in time. We have to be able to de-nest all of those different threads of conversations that humans do intrinsically. We all do it while we're talking to one another, and on those chat conversations that's happening. But in order for it to be able to pull that information out into structured data that clearly shows the life cycle of each quote individually, you have to kind of unentangle all of those threads of conversation.
It's understanding historical conversational context. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, and how that is specific to each individual participant of every conversation, because it changes based on who's talking and how they're able to process information, how they like to process information.
I guess within reason, in terms of in one particular market for one particular product, the language is quite common because people do mimic and copy, and there's a way of saying something in your particular market that will be different in equity derivatives. It will be the same but different in swaps or in options as well. But the actual language used.
Yeah, exactly.
It's quite finite again, right? Everyone copies,
That's why we
follows.
look at each individual desk, and we kind of, that onboarding process involves taking a big sample of that data and then starting to tag up bits of it, and then continuously having a sample rate inside of that to be able to tag it and continuously keep that data quality high. Well, thanks, Scott. It's been a really good conversation today. So I'll let you go. And I suppose you just want to let people know how they can move forward.
Yep, thanks, Capers. There's good information on our chat strategy report that you can see on the website, and we are continually updating and keeping people aware of new technologies and developments, and we do that via our blogs and our newsletters as well. So there's plenty of information out there to find.